you are a Pitch Wars mentor, and I wanted to make sure I ask you about that. What is a Pitch Wars mentor, and what did that teach you about publishing, writing, both?
Sure. So I'm not a current Pitch Wars mentor, but I did mentor for 5 years. So I feel like I have a pretty good understanding of the program. Pitch Wars is a program that pairs authors who don't yet have agents with authors who do, most of which are published. Some of them are not published, but they're freelance editors, or they certainly have an agent. They're at some level of degree, like at more advanced than an author who's just querying. And they get matched up. Writers submit sample pages and a pitch, and the mentors go through submissions and pick someone to work with. And then it's a period of like 3 months where the mentor works with the mentee on their whole manuscript. And it's category specific. So if you're a middle grade mentor, and I always was a middle grade mentor, you work with a middle grade manuscript. And then it's all leading up to this agent round where they share pitches and first pages, and a whole bunch of agents are involved and make a bunch of requests. And it's a kind of crazy time for the agents who have to read a lot of stuff really, really fast because people start making offers on the hot items. So what I have learned from Pitch Wars, one thing, which I've already kind of harped on this, but I'll say it again, is the value of community. Some of my closest writing friends are my past mentees, or fellow mentors, because there's a lot of behind the scenes community with the mentors. And the mentees also have their own community where all the mentees from a certain year, are on a Facebook group together, and they support each other through all the ups and downs and stresses of it. And so just that community is so important and so useful in lifting you up and helping you celebrate. Actually, when I had my launch party for Bloodwater Paint, I had 6 or 7 former mentees who flew in from out of state to be there, because the time I had put in to their books was really important to them, and we built a relationship, and they were so excited for me when my debut novel finally came out. Several of my mentees actually got published before I ever did. But yeah, so that community is the number one thing. And I would say Pitch Wars is really selective, and there are a lot of people who apply and don't get in, and it's hard. And I think that especially when you see the flurry of people who are getting requests and book deals because of Pitch Wars, and you couldn't get in, that can be really hard to feel like you don't have access to that. I would say I never applied to Pitch Wars, but I did apply to other similar contests and never got in. So not all books are suited to that kind of contest, or you might get into Pitch Wars and then not get any requests in the agent round. That's also normal. And I had a mentee who didn't get any requests in the agent round, and her book ended up selling at auction. So not all books are suited to that. The other thing I would say I learned from Pitch Wars is, as a mentor, you get a tiny fraction of a glimpse of what agents do, in terms of you get submissions, and you get a query letter, and you get 5 or 10 pages. And from those, you can request full manuscripts, but from those, you're trying to pick one person to work with. And I used to, there's your kitty.
I just insisted on making an appearance on the show, especially guest star.
I have a cat who I'm surprised hasn't come through here yet. So I used to get, as a middle grade mentor, I used to get around 100 submissions. YA mentors get even more. I think as Pitch Wars has gotten more and more popular, everyone gets more. And I learned how extremely not personal it is when an agent or an editor passes, because there were so many things that I passed on that weren't right for me, but have gone on to be published books. And maybe then I read them and loved them, or maybe I read them and I didn't like them, and I was like, this is still not for me. But publishing is subjective, right? And I also learned how it really only took me, excuse me, it really only took me a couple pages to know when something wasn't going to be right for me. But again, that it was totally subjective, that it wasn't, and in our mentor group, we would be talking about submissions because writers could submit to multiple mentors. And there would be something that like, just, I didn't catch my eye at all. Other mentors would be raving about it and fighting about it, or there'd be something that I just thought was absolutely amazing and no one else was interested in it. And part of me would go, wait, is there something wrong with me? But no, it was that this was a match for me, and the same thing is true when you're trying to get an agent. And then when you're trying to find the right editor to work with, it's so subjective, and it's hard not to take the rejections personally. But it's really not personal. It's about making the right match. So I got a glimpse of that in Pitch Wars, I think.
No, it's that bully from elementary school. Somehow they've gone on to become a literary agent, and it's personal.
Well, that might be the one case where it could be. But
that must have required all of your skills as an actress when your mentees were getting deals and you weren't, and you were Oscar clapping for the winner as a nominee. Oh, good for you. I'm not dying inside at all.
It was really hard. And even just with my critique partners, like they all got book deals before I did. And it was hard. And I definitely had major woe is me, when is it my turn moments. But I also was always completely thrilled for them. Like the two things were true at the same time. So I don't want to diminish that. Yeah, it was really hard. And I think that that's really hard if you are one of the people who in your group of writing friends is one of the last to get to whatever milestone. But the great thing about that is by the time I got to my debut novel, I had so many friends who were established authors, who had multiple books out, who had already moved on to a new agent or been through all the things. So that when I was trying to figure out, is this normal, or I was stressed about this piece of debuting or that, I have so many people to turn to who can then talk to me about from their place of experience. So if you do feel like you're behind, you keep building those relationships, not so you can use them later, so you can have the relationships, but you'll have those relationships so that when you get to whatever that next step is, you've got people who are a few steps ahead who can reach back and lend you a hand. So that's the bright side of it. But yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say it wasn't hard because it definitely was.
That's one nice thing about knowing so many authors. Authors, and I'm biased, of course, are generally speaking wonderful people. There's always the exception that proves the rule. But it's not like other industries. I've worked in finance where people really are clawing over each other to try and get a promotion, try and get ahead. There's some of that in publishing, but for the most part, a lot of those type A's that are the money, or the fame, they're not writing. They know better. They're day trading.
Yeah, and I think in Kidlit in particular, it's a really supportive community. It's not quite the same as my understanding in like adult markets, for example. But within Kidlit, there really is a wonderful community. And, I had to always remind myself, I didn't lose anything by someone else's success, right? And really I gained something in knowing these people who would then help lift me up. But yeah, we're all in this together.
One time it felt just a little personal. I'll share this brief story in the hopes of making esteemed audience feel even better if they've had something similar. There was an agent I desperately wanted who turned down an early version of Banneker and then went on to purchase a middle grade book about a brilliant inventor that makes robots. Ooh. And then the next book that author wrote was a young adult novel about zombies. And I just went, come on! Oh,
man, yeah. That's really hard.
But it wasn't my zombie novel. It wasn't my. Sure. There was room for everybody, and I should thank both that agent and that person because they kept those readers engaged and reading for the time when my book was finally available.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of which, I know I've got I'm watching our time, and I know it's flying away from us as it always does. Joy McCullough, have you ever seen a flying saucer, and do you believe in them?
I have not seen one, but I certainly would not close my mind to the possibility of them existing. That's sort of all I can say. I'm not a huge like sci-fi person. I don't know a lot about outer space. So, I'm not coming from a very educated position on the subject. But I'm open to possibility.
I will send you some literature, and we'll all look forward to your next book about flying saucers. It's going to be amazing.
Absolutely.